Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Audit and Finance Standing Committee for July 17th, 2024. It's 10 a.m. And my name is Paul Russell, and I represent Lower Sackville, which is arguably the best district of HRM. I'd also like to acknowledge that the Halifax Regional... and I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'd also like to acknowledge that the Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of June 19th of 2024. Can I have a motion to... Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any errors or omissions? Not seeing any. All in favor of the minutes, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? The minutes carried. Thank you. Next is the approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Over to the clerk. Do we have any changes for today?
No additions or deletions have been received by the clerk's office.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I have a motion to approve the order of business as presented? Thank you, Councillor Stoddard. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any changes from the committee? Not seeing any. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you. We have an order of business. Business arising out of the minutes? There is none. Call for declaration of conflict of interest? There is none. Okay. Motions of reconsideration, motions of rescission, consideration of deferred business and notices of tabled matters are all none. Correspondence. Do we have any correspondence today?
No correspondence or petitions have been received by the clerk's office.
Great. Thank you very much. And are there any petitions from the members of the committee? Not seeing any. And there are no presentations today. So the next item on the order of business is public participation. And this is the section where we get to hear from members of the public about any concerns that they have. As of 4:30 yesterday, there were no registered speakers for this meeting. So I'm going to reach out to the gallery and ask if anybody would like to step forward and address the Audit and Finance Standing Committee. And we have Colin. The center mic would be preferable. Yeah.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Finance Committee. Colin May, Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. I have one simple question. It's 107 days since the end of the financial year, and there are no publicly available audited financial statements. As far as I can recall, this is the latest in I don't know how many years. A long time. So there must be a good reason that for the delay, and I suggest that in future, they should be publicly available and dealt with by the Finance and Audit Committee at least within 60 days. I don't think that's unreasonable. And if there's a good reason for a delay, then the city should put out a release saying that there's a delay and that giving a brief explanation why. And that's all I have to say, sir.
Thank you very much, Colin. The CAO will address that.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. May. They are coming to the next Audit and Finance Committee. Of course, the municipality has to receive financial statements from other entities which it is responsible to consolidate. One of them would be Halifax Water, who had a new enterprise resource management system installed this year. Halifax Water's financial statements, audited financial statements, were just recently approved and at their audit committee and at a board meeting, and our audited financial statements will come to the next Audit and Finance Committee meeting and will be approved by this council, I believe, at the council meeting in September. The requirement under the provincial legislation around municipalities is that the audited financial statements need to be completed by September 30th.
Financial statements, and I guess that was the reason, but I'll just go back and say that the public should be informed they're delayed and why. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. May. I'm going to look again to the gallery and ask if there are any further speakers who would like to come forward and address the Audit and Finance Standing Committee. Are there any members of the public who would like to address the Audit and Finance Standing Committee? And third and final time, are there any members of the public who would like to address the Audit and Finance Standing Committee? And I'm not seeing any. Let's move ahead. The next item on the agenda is information items brought forward, and there is nothing. And now we get to the Auditor General's report. For this report, there are two reports from the Auditor General, and they are closely related to each other. So, as I understand it, there is a single presentation that covers both reports. So I would like to see if we can address both reports at the same time and ask questions about either report as we're going ahead instead of doing one after the other. If there are any motions that follow that, then let's work with those motions separately. This is that we are one of the few municipalities that has an Auditor General is a very good thing. We normally try not to expose our dirty laundry, and the Auditor General's job is to do exactly that. But in so doing, it helps us become a better municipality. Andrew, are you ready? You're good to go. I'm going to turn over the floor to the Auditor General, Andrew Atherton, and welcome to City Hall.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me here today on, we're going to call it a sticky July morning. My original note said a beautiful summer morning, but that didn't quite work out, so we'll go with a sticky July morning. As the chair said, I'm here to discuss two audit reports with you, Management of Business Continuity and Enterprise Risk Management. I'd like to thank both management and staff across HRM for their assistance as we conducted these audits. Both topics reached into many different business areas, and we had support and cooperation from everyone in the municipality as we worked through them. That kind of goes without saying, but I think it's important to note all of our audits require the support of the staff across HRM. We're in their way when they're trying to do their work, and I just want to say thank you for their support of these. At the same time, I really want to thank the folks back in my office, the amazing team that I have. They do all the work to make these audits happen. They've all done all the heavy lifting to get us through the final stages and get us here today. On that note, I'd like to introduce two of these amazing folks that I have with me. To my far right, I have Ashley Maxwell. She was responsible for the business continuity audit. And immediately to my right, Temi Fawoli. She led our work on enterprise risk management. Thanks to both of you and everyone else back in the office for making my job so easy. With that said, let me get into the details. I'm going to start with business continuity. Oh, I skipped some notes. It's not a good start. I'll go through the key points of each audit individually in a minute, but first I want to touch on some similar issues identified in both audits. Each of these topics is a little theoretical. Neither are clear services provided to the public, neither have an obvious and measurable cost of not completing them, but both are important and help to mitigate potential future impacts on our municipality. Much like we all pay our insurance, we have our 72-hour emergency kits at home, we do our general preventative maintenance on our houses and cars, it's important that HRM properly plan and prepare for future uncertainties, I'll call them. Unfortunately, we found that was not happening in either audit. Instead, we found a lack of central direction and a failure to prioritize either of these topics, and that has led us to poor business continuity planning and inadequate risk management across the municipality. Now, having said that, I'm hopeful that management intend to put some emphasis on both of these areas. You'll see as I go through this that all 24 recommendations have been accepted, and I look forward to seeing some actions taken over the coming months to implement them. Okay, let me get into the details now. I'm going to start with business continuity. Now, as I said, because neither of these topics are everyday conversation material, I'm going to start each audit off with a bit of a definition. You can see here an internationally accepted definition of business continuity, but for the purposes of our discussion, let's consider it to mean having a plan to allow the municipality to keep offering the services it needs to offer in a timely manner when something goes wrong. A big part of this planning is determining which services to prioritize and how long any specific service can be put on hold in a disaster situation. So what did we find? Basically, not nearly as much as I would have hoped we would. There was limited oversight in place to ensure the municipality and its various business units were doing an appropriate job of planning for a significant business interruption. We found very little done in the way of business impact analysis. In a nutshell, that's figuring out what your services are, which are critical to the municipality, and how long it is okay for them not to be available. Finally, there was no corporate-wide business continuity plan, and many of the business units we looked at either had no plan or the plan in place was found to be inadequate. Overall, we found the municipality is taking a reactive approach to managing disruptions rather than a proactive one. This means relying on the great people working for the municipality and leaning heavily on them to figure it out on the fly when things go sideways. While these folks do amazing work, failure to have a plan puts additional stress on them in already stressful situations. And it could mean unnecessary work occurs when they're dealing with a disruption. Instead of pulling out the plan you created before things went wrong, the team are forced to figure it out as they go. Getting down further into the details, I'll walk you through some of the areas that demonstrate the lack of corporate direction that I believe is leading to the outcomes we have found. The ultimate issue is the lack of a corporate business continuity plan. We also noted that even where there are business unit plans or parts of plans, no exercises are occurring to test those plans. Again, it's easy to hear this as theoretical, but determining which business unit to prioritize before the crisis hits is a lot easier than hashing it out in the middle of things. For instance, do we restore fire or police services first? Doing that in the heat of the battle, so to speak, is a lot more challenging than having some discussions beforehand. Now, we did find a 2017 emergency plan that outlines the expected business continuity management program for HRM, but it has not been implemented. At that time, management established various goals for the program, but none of these have been achieved. And we were unable to find any plans or timelines for implementation. Looking a little further into the issues around corporate direction, we did find that overall corporate responsibilities for business continuity planning were generally understood by the folks responsible for them, despite a lack of documentation. At the same time, as discussed, business continuity planning really hasn't happened. So while the roles may be understood, they're not being completed as intended. As might be expected with a lack of prioritization, we found very little in terms of policies or procedures around business continuity, although a template which can be used to create business unit plans has been circulated. We also found business continuity training has not been offered to HRM staff, and no training requirements have been identified for the key staff responsible for business continuity. In general, it is clear that more guidance and direction is necessary to move this forward. We also found a general lack of appropriate oversight. The Municipal Emergency Management Planning Committee is supposed to be a key part of the process, but we found this committee has had no discussions around the status of business continuity planning. Municipal bylaws direct that that committee is responsible to inform the Executive Standing Committee about emergency plans, which include business continuity, but we could not find a single update addressing planning in the last 7 years. While management is supposed to provide these updates, ultimately it comes down to all of you as elected representatives to ensure you are asking for that information on important topics such as business continuity. So when we talk now about what we found when we visited business units to learn how business continuity planning is being implemented across the municipality. One of the key steps in developing a continuity plan is a business impact analysis. I touched on this earlier, but a BIA considers what services are most important and which can be put on hold and for how long. We tested 6 business units to assess their efforts and found 5 of the 6 had not completed a business impact analysis. Without this basic understanding of service requirements, it is much harder for a business unit to prepare a meaningful continuity plan or to respond in the case of a disruption. When we looked to determine which of the 6 business units we tested had prepared actual business continuity plans, we identified only 2 that had a reasonable starting point. 3 others had a documented plan, but these required significant work and may not be particularly helpful in an emergency. The final business unit had nothing documented as a business continuity plan. To me, this emphasizes the importance of central leadership to ensure appropriate plans are in place across the municipality. So that's all I have on business continuity. As you can see, we have 10 recommendations. Management have accepted each of them. As always, I encourage you to ask for a detailed action plan and laying out management's plans to address our recommendations. Now I'm going to jump straight forward into enterprise risk management. Now, again, similar to business continuity, the topic warrants some explanation before I get into what we found. The definitions shown here for strategic or enterprise risk and operations risk come directly from HRM's enterprise risk management framework. But before we talk about those, I'm going to touch on risk management at a very general level. At its most basic, risk management is about figuring out what might impact your business and deciding if you want to do something about it. For HRM, this means identifying the risks the municipality faces, determining what controls exist or could be put in place to manage or mitigate those risks, and then monitoring them. This is a key step in the process that I alluded to, or there is a key step in the process that I alluded to a second ago that is often overlooked. That is the determination of how much risk or which risks an organization is willing to accept. It's completely reasonable to determine that you are okay accepting a risk and not doing anything to mitigate the likelihood or impact of that risk, but it has to be an intentional process. I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit here, but this part is very important in the situation such as what we found in HRM. With very little being completed in a formal manner, we occasionally heard comments such as, "We're doing fine. The world hasn't ended, business continues, nothing to worry about." But without an intentional program assessing risks and determining what, if anything, should be done to manage or mitigate their impacts, it's impossible for management to know that they are appropriately managing risk. Maybe they are unaware of a major risk, or perhaps they have a bunch of controls and time being spent reducing a risk that they're comfortable living with. Coming back to the definitions on the screen, strategic or enterprise risks are those that impact the organization as a whole. They may exist at the business unit level, but the impacts would be felt broader, either because they directly impact multiple business units or because they would impact a strategic priority for the municipality. Operational risks are those at the business unit level related to their day-to-day operations. They may become an enterprise risk, particularly if they aren't managed well. Okay, enough of the background information. What did we find? Overall, we found that risk management is not very well prioritized. There is poor oversight of both enterprise and operational risks. It isn't always clear who is responsible for risk management, and we identified some concerns with the framework. We did find that risks are generally being identified, both operational and enterprise level, but it was impossible to determine what was being done to actively manage those risks, and the level of risk remaining after treatment occurs is not known. We also noted that no training is offered around risk management. All in all, I would suggest this is a case of lack of central direction and priority being placed on risk management. All right, I'll talk you through the specific issues in the report now, and I'm going to start with your own role. The Audit and Finance Committee's role in enterprise risk management is defined in your terms of reference and noted directly in the enterprise risk management framework. Namely, your job is to monitor and oversee the adequacy and effectiveness of HRM's risk management framework and risk management plans. We were able to find evidence of you receiving ERM reports once in 2021 and once more in early 2024. Nothing was reported to you in 22 or 23. Within the two reports presented, we found the depth of the reporting was insufficient, and we had concerns with the accuracy of some of the information in the most recent report. Now, given that you haven't received enough information to date, what has to happen to correct it? I think the most basic step is that this committee has to be more assertive in asking for regular reporting from management and more incisive in its questioning. This report that I presented today can be a good starting point of issues to consider. And if you're not comfortable with what questions should be asked or how to interpret the answers, then additional training should be obtained. At the end of the day, your role is to check that management are identifying and managing the risks that could undermine the ability of the municipality to achieve its priorities and to provide its services to the citizens of HRM. Moving on, let's take a look at corporate leadership. We also found that direction was lacking here. The executive leadership team have not completed the in-depth review and monitoring of risk that is contemplated in the framework. While the Risk and Insurance Department are supposed to provide risk management guidance, we found this lacking. They have met with business units to discuss potential risks, but their work has not addressed the depth of concerns identified in our report. The final point I want to make related to corporate direction ties to a report Risk and Insurance asked the Corporate Planning Department to prepare, looking at enterprise risk management. This report presented 11 recommendations in early 2023, with some of them overlapping our recommendations or similar to our recommendations. Only 2 of those 11 recommendations were implemented by the end of our fieldwork in May of this year. The Corporate Planning Group had identified 5 high-priority suggestions in its report, and only 1 of those was complete. While conducting an internal review is a good initiative, failure to quickly action those suggestions is further evidence of the lack of priority placed on risk management. I'm hopeful we'll see more action taken to address both the corporate planning recommendations and our recommendations in the coming months. Okay, I'll drill down a little deeper into the details. Now, this slide covers a number of the findings that we had. HRM's Enterprise Risk Management Framework defines a risk management committee, which is intended to address a number of areas, including supporting business units with their risk management, determining whether operational risks should be flagged as enterprise risks, and supporting executive leadership in the risk management process. This committee has yet to be formed. We were told the committee had been deferred due to COVID, but will now be in place in early 2025. This extended delay is just another example of the lack of priority being placed on this area. Looking down at the ground level, we found that 9 of the 10 business units we talked to were not using the framework. Some of them were not even aware it existed. While the framework was built as an enterprise risk management tool, it does provide a number of relevant directions for operational risk management. Intuitively, to have a connected risk management system, it makes sense that a similar approach would be used to manage both enterprise and operational risks. I've regularly mentioned the framework which HRM has in place to cover enterprise and to some extent operational risk management. Well, this document's a good first step. We did identify a number of concerns with it. It needs to be updated to reflect the latest version of the international standards on which it is based. There are some gaps in its directions, and most significantly, it needs a set of policies and procedures beneath it for more detailed direction to staff. I'd say the final item on this slide is perhaps the most concerning to me. To better explain it, I'm going to give you a quick summary of what should happen once a risk is identified and assessed. Step 1 should be a decision of whether anything is required or if you can live with the risk without any mitigating activities. From there, a treatment plan is developed, including identifying the risk owner. This person is responsible for ensuring the risk is appropriately managed. Any existing controls that help manage the risk should be identified, and any new controls required should be determined. For all of those controls, a control owner should be designated. Now, the control owner is not the same as the risk owner. Instead, they're the folks that will make sure the controls identified are in place and doing what was intended in terms of managing the associated risk. In our testing of enterprise risks, we did not find a single control owner documented in the risk management process. Not one. We did not find a single appropriate treatment plan. And the level of risk remaining after controls were put in place, known as residual risk, was not known or monitored. Now, I realize stuff is happening. Controls exist that are mitigating some of the identified risks, but it needs to become more intentional. Move over to operational risk now. You'll see that most of the same concerns exist here. I've already talked about the need for overall leadership and oversight, so we'll jump straight into our results. We found inconsistent approaches used across business units to identify risks. For instance, planning and development did not even have a risk register in place. Other units had identified risks, But just as we found with the enterprise level, this is where things mostly stopped. We tested 20 operational risks across the 9 business units and did not find one appropriate treatment plan. Nor was there any documentation for any of the 20 showing the residual risk level. So while a few, 6 of the 20, had controls identified to mitigate them, none of them assessed the level of risk that remained once those controls were in place. Management told us that there are controls that exist to mitigate each risk, but if this is the case, it is, I'll say, more from good fortune rather than a well-planned intentional risk management approach. The root of the concerns continues to be need for corporate direction. As noted, the framework references operational risk, but the business units largely don't use it or aren't even aware of it. It's incumbent on senior leadership to determine what is expected and to start creating a consistent approach to identify and manage risk across the municipality. The CAO did inform my office at the start of the fieldwork that she realized that they do not have any standardized processes for operational risk, and she's told me that this will be a priority going forward, and I look forward to seeing it. Okay, last details slide. There's currently no risk management training offered to HRM staff. While some staff may seek this training elsewhere, HRM needs to ensure all management and staff are getting a consistent message and that everyone is receiving it. When this training is available, and I believe it is being worked on, this should also be offered to all of you. It'll help you better understand what is happening at the management and staff level and assist you in your oversight role. Okay, as you can see, we made 14 recommendations. Management have accepted them all. Well, we will complete our follow-up as per usual, roughly 18 months from now, and I have no doubt you will request an action plan. This topic leaves you in a unique position to monitor progress more in depth than our typical audits. As noted, you already have an oversight role for enterprise risk management, so now you can use this report to ask questions of management and dig a little deeper into their progress. With that, I'm going to stop talking and allow you folks to ask me some questions.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for that report. I appreciate it, and again, being able to look into what we have as a set of operations is incredibly helpful. Before we go to members of the committee, I'm going to ask the CAO to respond to your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Municipal Auditor General and the Municipal Auditor General staff. You know, these recommendations are going to help us polish the apple and improve. But I do want to address some comments, and perhaps I'll start with business continuity, and then I'll move into enterprise risk management, address them in the same order as the Municipal Auditor General did. Just because I want to leave more context with staff and the public also in terms of how we're operating right now. With respect to business continuity, the business continuity plans are a direction that the Executive Standing Committee would be aware is a goal within each executive director's goals for this year to have them completed by September 30th. After that, they will be coming to the Executive Standing Committee for a discussion and a review. And we have been, despite the fact that we don't have documented updated business continuity plans, providing municipal service with minimal disruption for 275 years. So the know-how is there. What we're lacking is documentation that will help future-proof us, because we're very dependent upon the staff knowing how to do their jobs and knowing how the system operates. Having the additional documentation around business continuity helps us train new employees and helps ensure that we've got resilience if we have employees who are not available. Secondly, in addition to having the business continuity plans updated by this September, the other thing that was initiated last January was an update to the municipal service catalog, which had not been updated, I believe, since 2016. That initiation occurred because it was recognized that that was an important tool to help onboard and train the next municipal council. So that has been completed, and within that, there is an inventory now that's up to date for all of our municipal services, and it does prioritize the municipal services. So that is a very important step to help us both with the business continuity planning and with enterprise risk management. So that's that piece. And finally, with respect to business continuity as it relates to enterprise risk management, in addition to the business continuity goal I mentioned that executive directors have this year, they have also been given a goal to get the operational business unit risk registers completed by March 31st of this fiscal year. And legal and risk has provided a template to each business unit to do that. So that work will be completed by March 31st. In terms of how we manage risk, although we don't have an enterprise risk management system or risk register for each business unit that clearly identifies risk owners, and we may not have the documentation the municipal auditor general would like to see around managing risk, I would argue that risk management is embedded in almost everything we do. We do have an accountability structure, an organizational hierarchy, and functional job descriptions that make it easily possible to identify who is responsible for risks. We are working in accordance with the business plans approved by council and the strategic priorities set by council. And in terms of how we manage risk, right now we have a governance structure that's pretty tight in terms of a system of bylaws and administrative orders and policies that are all designed to manage and mitigate various types of risk. So risk management is all over the organization. We just don't have an enterprise risk management system that is documenting it in a robust and detailed way. And that is something that if we do get there, will definitely help us improve. Finally, I want to note in terms of enterprise risk management, there is evidence of improvement. The evidence that we have improved as a municipality is an improving financial position when you look at some of the indicators in our KPIs like liquidity or the number of deficits we've had in the last 5 years. And more importantly, in terms of managing risk, I think the best measure we have right now is our insurance claims experience and our insurance rating, which has improved over the last few years. So if we were not managing risk, we would see increasing number of insurance claims, increasing dollar value of insurance claims payouts, and also increasing cost to the municipal insurance portfolio. So, you know, insurance is one risk mitigation tool, but the other risk mitigation tool is getting an enterprise risk management system in place that's functional. So all is not lost, but there's a lot of work to be done, which the next council is going to have to balance in terms of where does it sit with strategic priorities for investment, because I do believe there will be some budget implications that we have to flesh out when we come back with the action plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, CAO. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andrew, and the team at the AG's office. And Kathy, thank you. I was going to, if the chair hadn't asked, I was going to ask you your thoughts on this. There's a lot of recommendations here, and more than usual, which tell us that we have some work to do. Andrew, K1, is that what they're called? K1 emergency management that we engaged to do a review, which came to the executive in May and to council in June, highlighted a lot of the similar things that you did. And in fact, I think in the report that they bought, they indicated that they had talked with your office as part of this process and the work that they were doing. It sounds like a lot of the same things you're saying, which is we've got a lot of good people. They're doing some great work, but we need to document these processes in a formal way to make sure that we're following them, not just relying on good people at a time of difficult times. You know, we've had our share of emergencies, for example, in the last little while, and we've worked well with other organizations and orders of government. But I think the main message you're telling us in a number of recommendations here is the same thing that, I don't know if it's K1 or KI, emergency man. You're familiar with the work that they were doing, obviously. Do you see a sort of juxtaposition between the work that they've done and reported to council and the work that you're talking about here?
Business continuity is certainly a subset of emergency management. Emergency management is a broader view of it. Business continuity is really focused on the services that the municipality provides. But yes, there's similarities in terms of comparing to their report and our report. Yeah, I see a lot of the same things. Nobody can question the effort and the ability of the staff across the municipality to make things happen when something goes wrong. What I'm looking for in particular is let's make that task as easy as we can for those folks. And as the CAO referenced, if we lose some key people, we don't want to lose the ability to respond in a situation. We want to have that documented.
So what K1 did for us was provide an emergency management program document review process, which I think is part of this. I'm trying to figure out like, we, as the chair mentioned, we have an auditor general who provide information to us that allow us to make decisions. What are other, and maybe the CAO might even know this, well, like what are other orders of, what is the province doing on some of these key things? You've got some experience in the province. You know, what are they doing in business continuity, enterprise risk management? Are they following a more formal process than we are?
I can't speak to what the province is doing now. I'm not familiar. I know that I recall doing a business continuity audit many years ago provincially, but where they are now, I'm not sure where they are.
Do you have a sense, CAO, at all, in the discussions you have with the province?
Yes, I would say that they do not have documented business continuity plans for all departments, and I would say they are not doing formalized enterprise risk management.
Okay. One of the things that's encouraging when I read this report, and when we got it last Friday or Saturday, whenever, was to think about the number of times since our CAO has been in place that she's talked about things like operational risk assessment and business continuity. And I know that there's some work being done. My hope would be that this roadmap, not only for the CAO, but for council, both for executive committee and for audit and finance standing committee, that there is a role for us as elected members to ensure that we are aware of these things. Earlier this year, at executive committee, we brought forward a motion to make the new community safety department reporting in. I mean, ER did, but now the community safety department now reports in through the executive committee, which I think is going to be helpful as we go forward. Anyway, thank you very much, Andrew. There's lots to look at here and lots of work to be done. And you know, 18 months is going to be a little bit too long for us to wait to get some of this stuff going. It sounds like some is now, but we're going to have to do a little bit more in the interim. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Andrew and the audit team. Some of my questions were actually answered by our CAO and our mayor, because in my notes I've got the June 18th motion, and I went back and I looked at some of the conversations that were done around that. So when I looked at that motion and then was reading the report again and going back and forth, one of the things I thought is that this process has actually already started. So that was helpful. One of the things about if it's in program audits I was involved with a long time ago, the conversation would always be if it's not written, it didn't happen. And so making sure that things are written down is a really important thing. Sometimes what happens, though, is that staff change a lot. And some of the things that I have seen in risk management, it's the position that has been delegated as an owner rather than a person because of the transition that happens within teams. So I'm just wondering if, when you say that there's no owner, are you looking for a person's name or are you looking for the person in the role? So that's one thing. And then, of course, as always, I would like to see an action plan within 3 months if that would be acceptable, that we have an action plan within 3 months to see how we're going to implement the recommendations. And it does seem like that's already started, so 3 months should seem acceptable. And the CAO might let us know that. Thank you. So just that one question about role or person.
Through the chair to the councillor, yes, 3 months is fine.
We would have been looking for any sort of designation, whether it was an individual or a role. As you say, the person in a role may change, so anybody defined there would be acceptable.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Go ahead, Councillor Stoddard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Andrew, and your team for this report. Well done. It's kind of touching on what the Deputy Mayor said. You were saying there's no control officer or control owner. In your view, who should this control owner be? I don't know if that's for the CAO or for you. Thank you.
I would never want to tell management who should be responsible for something. That's a management decision. But the control owner is going to be somebody further down, I'll say, in the organization that understands what that control is, how it's working, what it's supposed to accomplish, and is able to ensure that it's happening. The risk owners are generally a more senior level, and most of those were identified in the testing we did. That I think often that would be the executive director at a business unit would be a risk owner. Right. They'd be responsible to make sure that the risk is being managed. And then the control owners, there could be multiple control owners depending on how many controls there are to address a risk. And then the owners would be somebody a little further down in the organization that's more into the day-to-day work.
Would you be comfortable if one of the members of this committee were a control officer, or is that outside of our role?
No, the control owner is very much a day-to-day, it's somebody who's doing the work. Your job is to be talking to management and ensuring that that work is happening. And even really, when you get down to the details of specific controls, that's probably getting beyond what you would be, I would expect your task to be. You're going to be talking to the senior leadership of the organization and ensuring that the whole risk management process is happening and that they know that all of these pieces are happening.
Okay, so we'll be discussing with the executive directors about the process and how they're managing it. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stoddard. Go ahead, Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the report. I'm here out of interest, not actually on the executive committee. I understand you were looking at processes and general principles and that sort of thing, but is it possible to give us a sense of what you see as the most critical risks that would interrupt HRM operations that we should be aware of?
That's well beyond the scope of the audit that we did. We're looking at the process. And it would be, in my opinion, it would be up to management to determine what the most important significant risks are. So I really wouldn't be comfortable trying to give you my perspectives on that, sorry.
What about most likely risks?
Again, that's, in terms of defining the risks and assessing their likelihood and their impact, that's a management role to look at those and decide where they fit.
Okay, all right, no, I understand. It's just, it would be helpful to have some more specifics because depending on the risk, you might approach things slightly differently, but I understand this is an overview. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Morris. There was one statement in the business continuity audit that caught my attention more than others. Others have been addressed by the other questions and by your report, but one of the comments was the business unit says that they do not feel there is a need to conduct exercises, and they would instead rely on experiences that had happened in order to be able to test their risk management protocols. I'm wondering if you could address that and speak to whether or not that's a good idea.
I think using real-life experiences is a great first step. That's going to give you a lot more actionable information than a tabletop exercise will. But it needs to be done in a more thorough, intentional manner. And you need to be looking and saying, okay, well, which aspects of our continuity plan did get worked through that real-life situation? Which pieces have not been? You need to do lessons learned on the ones that were, and the pieces that weren't touched under the real-life scenario still need to be exercised or tested. So it's not a bad starting point, but it needs to be a starting point, and there needs to be a lot more done beyond that.
Okay, thank you very much. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have the motion that the Audit and Finance Standing Committee requests the CAO to develop an action plan to address the recommendations from the Management of Business Continuity Enterprise Risk Management Audit and report back to Audit and Finance Standing Committee within 3 months.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor seconds that. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor. Is there anything further on that?
No, that's good.
Okay. Thank you. And I don't see any further questions on the board. Are we ready for the question? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Andrew, and to your team for bringing these audits forward. Once again, we very much appreciate the work that you and your team do to help us become a better municipality. And if we don't have a good hard look at some of what makes HRM work, it makes our job a little more difficult. So thank you. The next item on the agenda is 13.2.1, Administrative Order 10, Partial Tax Exemption Administrative Order and Land Titles Clarification Act Tax Relief. So for this, we do have a motion that is in our package. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Who else wants to put it forward? I will. Okay.
Nobody else is on the board.
Councillor Stoddard, did you want to put it forward?
Councillor Stoddard, your mic? There we go.
Oh, I'm
Thank you.
sorry. Thank you. I move that the Audit and Finance Standing Committee, 1, discharge the property tax owned by the applicant as defined in the staff report dated June 25th, 2024, for a total amount of $17,445.59. 2, discharge the property tax owned by the applicant, 2, as defined in the staff report dated June 25th, 2024, for a total of $25,325.03, and discharge the property tax owned by applicant 3 as defined in the staff report dated June 25th, 2024, for a total amount of $25,047.07. I so move.
Thank you, and that's seconded by the mayor. Thank you, Councillor Stoddard, for that. Do we have any questions? We do have a staff in the room who is able to address the questions. And I don't see any. Are we ready for the question? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Great. Thank you very much. We have a motion that passes. Thank you, Vicky, and your team for joining us today. We have nothing from the Grants Committee. We have nothing from the members of Standing Committee. There are no motions. There is no in-camera. There are no added items. Are there notices of motion? Not seeing any. The date of the next meeting of the Audit and Finance Standing Committee is August 21st, 2024. And so could I have a motion to adjourn, please? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We stand adjourned at 10:51 a.m.